Hey everyone, I'm Manly. I'm 27 years old, and my own parents kicked me out of the house that I was paying for. Before I tell you how I uncovered a massive 7-month-long lie and a secret debt that threatened to leave them all homeless, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always cool to see how far these stories travel. Alright, so let's get into it. It all blew up on a Sunday, one of those sticky, late August Sundays in the Midwest where the air feels heavy and everyone's mood is a little sour. I was coming off a 12-hour shift at the restaurant. I'm a manager there, and weekends are brutal. My feet were aching. My back was a tight knot of pain, and all I wanted was a hot shower and 5 minutes of absolute silence. But first, groceries, because if I didn't buy them, nobody would. The fridge would be empty, and my family would somehow act like it was a mystery how food appeared in it every week. I pushed open the front door, the familiar squeak of the hinge announcing my arrival like a butler I didn't pay for. The smell of stale air and something vaguely like burnt toast hit me. In the living room, the TV was blaring some mind-numbing game show. My younger brother Matt was sprawled on the couch, his face lit up by the ghostly blue glow of his phone. He didn't look up. He never did. His world was contained in that little glass screen, and the rest of us were just moving furniture. My dad, Richard, was leaning against the kitchen counter, staring down at his coffee mug, like it held the secrets to the universe. He was a master of strategic silence, of making himself invisible when tension was in the air. And then there was my mother, Karen. She was standing by the stove, her arms crossed so tight against her chest, it looked like she was trying to hold herself together. Her eyes, when they locked onto me, were like chips of ice. I hoisted the 2 heavy grocery bags, the plastic handles digging into my fingers. "Hey," I said, my voice tired. Traffic was a mess. She didn't answer. She just watched me with that piercing stare as I walked past her and set the bags on the counter. The thud they made seemed to echo in the tense quiet. I started unpacking, a robotic ritual I could do in my sleep. Milk, eggs, bread, the expensive French vanilla creamer Dad liked. The organic, gluten-free granola that Matt insisted was the only kind he could eat. It was a weekly routine. My money, my time, my effort. "Is that all you have to say for yourself?" she snapped. Her voice was sharp, designed to cut. It sliced right through the cheerful noise of the game show. I stopped, a carton of orange juice in my hand. I turned to face her, genuinely bewildered. "What are you talking about?" "Don't you dare play dumb with me, Manly," she said, taking a menacing step forward. "You walk in here smelling like a greasy kitchen, dropping off a few bags of food like you're some kind of saint bestowing charity upon the poor. You think that makes up for it?" "Makes up for what?" My mind was a frantic blur, searching for my crime. Had I forgotten something? An anniversary? A bill? No, I handled all the bills. That was the whole point. "Your attitude," she screeched, her voice climbing into a register that made my teeth ache. "The disrespect, the way you look down on us. You think you're so much better than us, don't you? With your little manager promotion and your hoarded savings." I just stared at her, dumbfounded. This was coming out of a clear blue sky. Matt finally looked up from his phone, a slow, cruel smirk spreading across his face. He was enjoying the show. My dad continued his staring contest with the countertop, a statue of indifference. His silence wasn't neutrality, it was an endorsement. That's when something inside me, something that had been stretched thin for a decade, something that had been abraded by 1,000 tiny cuts of disrespect and entitlement, finally snapped. But it wasn't a loud, explosive break, it was a quiet, cold one. The anger I should have felt was replaced by a profound, chilling emptiness. I was just done. I looked her dead in the eye, my voice low and steady, devoid of the exhaustion I felt just moments before. "What did I do wrong?" I asked, each word deliberate. "Besides, pay for this house." The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp as a shard of glass. My mother's face went from red to a blotchy white. Matt's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of shock. For the first time all evening, my dad flinched. "Get out!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with fury. She pointed a trembling finger at the door. "You are ungrateful. You are a poison in this house. Get out and never come back." I didn't argue. I didn't shout back. What was the point? I calmly walked over to the small table by the door where we kept the mail and car keys. I took the house key off my keyring, the metal cool against my skin, and placed it on the polished wood. Then I pulled out my wallet, took out the secondary credit card linked to my account, the one they used for emergencies like new video games for Matt or salon appointments for her, and laid it right next to the key. I turned, gave them one last long look, the furious mother, the silent father, the smirking brother, and walked out the door. The sound of it clicking shut behind me wasn't an ending. It was the first sound of my new life. At the time, I thought that was the worst it could get. I had no idea it was just the beginning. I drove for what felt like hours, with no destination in mind. Just a desperate need to put miles between me and that house. The sun bled across the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. But the world outside my windshield was a gray, featureless blur. My knuckles were bone white on the steering wheel. My jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. I finally saw a flickering neon sign off the highway, a lonely beacon in the growing darkness. Motel, it read. The vacancy sign blinking erratically? It would have to do. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke, industrial-strength bleach, and a deep, underlying sadness. The carpet was a tapestry of mysterious stains, and the single lamp cast a weak, yellowy glow. As I lay on the lumpy bed, the cheap bedspread scratching against my skin, I wasn't just tired. I felt hollowed out. And in that hollow space, the memories began to play, a relentless film reel of the past 10 years. It wasn't one big, dramatic event of abuse. It was a death by 1,000 cuts, a slow, steady erosion of my money, my time, my very sense of self. It started when I was 16. My dad got laid off from the factory, a place he'd worked for 20 years. His pride took a hit he never recovered from. My mom's part-time job as a receptionist was never going to be enough to cover the mortgage and the bills for a family of 4. So I became the solution. I got a job as a dishwasher at a local diner, Frank's Place. Frank Martinez, the owner, was a tough, no-nonsense guy who valued hard work above all else. I'd go from a full day of high school straight to the diner, standing for hours in a cloud of steam, my hands plunged in greasy water until they were red and raw. I'd get home around midnight, smelling of sanitizer and fried onions, and force myself to study for another 2 hours. I had to keep my grades up. I knew with a certainty that burned in my gut that a scholarship was my only way out, my only shot at a life that was my own. I'll never forget my first paycheck. It was a little over $200. To a 16-year-old, it felt like a fortune. I had it all planned out. I was going to buy a used Xbox 360 I'd seen at a pawn shop. But when I got home, my mom was sitting at the kitchen table, head in her hands, a stack of bills spread out before her. An overdue notice for the electricity bill was on top. It was red. I looked at the check in my hand, then at my mother's slumped shoulders. There was no choice, really. My first paycheck, and nearly everyone that followed, went into the family pot. My Xbox dream died that night. The pattern was set. My needs were always secondary. My wants were non-existent. A year later, for his 16th birthday, Matt wanted a car. They couldn't afford it, of course, but they found a way. They took out a small loan from a credit union, and my hours at the diner magically increased to cover the monthly payments. I was a junior in high school, working nearly 40 hours a week, so my brother could drive his friends to the movies in a 10-year-old Honda that felt like a Lamborghini to him. No one ever called it Manly's car, even though my sweat and exhaustion were paying for it. It was always Matt's car. He even complained that I sometimes left the driver's seat smelling like the diner when I had to use it to run an errand for my mom. When I received the letter offering me a full academic scholarship to the state university, I thought it would be a moment of shared celebration. This was it, my ticket. I ran into the living room, waving the letter. My mom glanced at it. Her first comment wasn't, "Congratulations," or, "I'm so proud of you." It was, "Well, that's good. Now that you don't have to pay for a college fund, you can help us out more with your salary from the diner." My dad just grunted from behind his newspaper. They didn't even come to my high school graduation. Said they couldn't get the time off work. I saw them at the mall the next day, browsing in a department store. College was my escape, but not really. I lived at home to save money. Money that ended up being funneled back to them anyway. I'd be in my room cramming for a calculus exam, and there would be a knock on the door. "Manly, the water heater's broken." The repairman quoted us $800. I had just gotten a small promotion at the diner, a bump up to line cook. My bonus check, the one I was going to use to finally buy a reliable laptop for my classes, went straight to the plumber. Matt, meanwhile, was in his room loudly celebrating a victory in some online video game. The injustice of it all was a constant, bitter taste in my mouth. He tried community college twice. He dropped out both times, racking up student loan debt that he had no intention of ever repaying himself. The first time, it was because the classes were boring. The second time, he just stopped going because the 8 a.m. start time was inhumane. They used the money I had given them for property taxes to cover his initial tuition. I only found that out when a delinquency notice showed up in the mail. When I confronted them, my dad just mumbled something about giving the boy a chance to find himself. My mom accused me of being jealous of my brother's creative spirit. Frank, my boss, saw it all. He never pried, but he saw the exhaustion in my eyes, saw me picking up every extra shift offered. He's the one who encouraged me to switch my major to business management. "You're smart, kid," he'd said one night, clapping me on the shoulder as I was wiping down the counter. "You've got a good head for numbers, and you know how to handle people. You're smarter than this greasy spoon. Don't let anyone hold you back." He gave me the manager position the day after I graduated. He came to my college graduation. He sat in the stands and cheered louder than anyone. He was more of a father to me than my own dad ever was. Lying there in that depressing motel room, the reek of stale cigarettes filling my lungs, I wasn't just angry. I was grieving. Grieving for the teenager who never got to be a kid, for the college student who never got a real college experience, for the daughter who was never seen as a daughter. I was an asset, an income stream, an ATM that happened to share their last name. And as I finally drifted off to a restless sleep, one thought echoed in my mind, cold and clear. They didn't kick out their daughter. They broke their piggy bank because it wasn't giving them enough fast enough. The first month of my so-called freedom was one of the hardest of my life. It turns out that being the sole financial pillar for a family of 4, even a dysfunctional one, creates some very bad habits. For them, it was a habit of dependency. For me, it was a habit of having absolutely no money to call my own. My entire adult life had been a frantic cycle of earning and giving. Now, for the first time, I had to earn and keep. It felt unnatural, almost criminal. After a few nights in the motel, I knew I couldn't sustain it. I found a room for rent in a shared house on the other side of town. It was a tiny attic room with a slanted ceiling that I kept hitting my head on, and a single window that overlooked a neighbor's messy backyard. I had to share a bathroom with 2 other guys, strangers who left wet towels on the floor and never replaced the toilet paper. It was a step down from the comfortable bedroom I'd had in my parents' house, but it was mine. It cost $500 a month, all utilities included. It was all I could afford after years of my salary disappearing into the black hole of my family's ever-growing needs. The loneliness was a physical presence. It was a heavy weight in my chest, a constant companion. It sat next to me in my beat-up 2008 Civic on the drive to work. It lay beside me in the narrow twin bed at night. I was so used to the constant background noise of my family, the TV always on, my mom's incessant complaints, Matt's loud music vibrating through the floor, that the profound silence of my little room was deafening. It gave me too much time to think, to doubt. I threw myself into work, picking up every extra shift I could. Frank didn't ask any questions. He just saw me there early and ready to work, and he approved the overtime. The money was piling up in my bank account for the first time ever, but I was too scared to spend it. The ghost of a future emergency, a broken down car, a medical bill, haunted me, so I lived like a broke college kid. I ate cheap instant ramen, the kind that costs $0.25 a pack, and peanut butter sandwiches. I was a 27-year-old restaurant manager, but I was living on the edge of poverty out of sheer terror. About 2 weeks in, I hit rock bottom. I was driving home from a closing shift sometime after 1 a.m. It was raining hard, the wipers struggling to keep up. Suddenly my car sputtered, coughed, and died right in the middle of the road. I managed to coast to the shoulder. I tried to restart it, but all I got was a sickening clicking sound. My heart plummeted into my stomach. I had about $600 to my name. Rent was due next week. A tow truck plus whatever was wrong with the engine. I was screwed, completely and utterly screwed. I sat there in the dark, the rain drumming on the roof, and I felt a wave of pure panic wash over me. For 10 years, I had been the emergency contact, the financial safety net for 3 other people. Now, in my first real emergency, I had no one. The urge to call them, to beg, was so powerful it made me dizzy. I could almost hear my mom's voice, a mix of "I told you so" and feigned concern before she'd agreed to lend me the money I had given her in the first place. Instead, I gripped the steering wheel and called the only person I could. I called Sarah. "You did it," she said, her voice a mix of shock and pride when I told her I had finally left. "You actually did it." "I'm sitting on the side of the road in a dead car, Sarah," I mumbled, my voice cracking. I have no money. I'm living in a stranger's attic. I feel like a complete failure." "A failure?" Her voice was fierce, indignant on my behalf. "Manly, you're free. This is the hard part. This is the detox. This is what it feels like when you first stand on your own 2 feet. They wobble. Don't you dare go back. Don't you even think about it. You call a tow truck. You use your credit card. You'll figure it out. You always do. But this time, you'll be figuring it out for you." Her words were the lifeline I needed. She was right. I wasn't that helpless kid anymore. I was a manager. I solved problems for a living. I took a deep breath, called a tow truck, and put the charge on my credit card, praying it wouldn't be declined. The next day, the mechanic gave me the news: a dead alternator. It would be $450 to fix. It would wipe out almost everything I had, but I paid it. Writing that check was one of the most empowering things I'd ever done. That night, I went back to my room and did something that was both painful and liberating. I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet. I typed in my income. Then I started listing my expenses: rent, car insurance, gas, phone bill, the car repair. For the first time, I was creating a real budget for one person, myself. Then I did something that was both painful and illuminating. I opened my old bank statements and started calculating just how much money I had given my family over the past 2 years since I'd become manager. I didn't even go back further. It was too depressing. The mortgage payments I'd taken over, the utility bills, the car repairs for their 2 cars, Matt's emergency money for concert tickets and video games, the $12,000 credit card debt of my parents that I had cleared because the collection calls were so frequent they were becoming my new background music. The final number I arrived at made me physically ill. It was more than I had paid for my entire college education, which I'd gotten a scholarship for anyway. It was enough for a hefty down payment on a small house. My house. Looking at that number on the screen was my real moment of clarity. This wasn't about love or family obligation. This was exploitation, plain and simple. I closed the laptop, the anger and hurt solidifying into a cold, hard resolve. I had been their college fund, their retirement plan, and their entertainment budget all rolled into one. The silence from my family continued. Not a single text, not a missed call, not even from Matt asking for money. It was unnerving. A small, wounded part of me, the part that still craved their approval, was hurt by their indifference. But the other, newer part of me, the part that was building a life in a tiny attic room and fixing her own damn car, understood. Their silence wasn't them giving me space. It was the silence of a person who has misplaced a tool. They hadn't realized they needed it yet. But they would. It was only a matter of time. 3 months, 94 days to be exact. That's how long the silence lasted. In that time, my life started to take shape, slowly, like a photograph developing in a darkroom. After 2 months in the shared house from hell, I had saved enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a small studio apartment. It wasn't in the best part of town, and the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor sneeze. But it was mine, all mine. The lease had my name on it, and only my name. I bought a small snake plant from the hardware store and named it Frank after my boss. It was a silly, small thing, but looking at it sitting on my windowsill, I felt a sense of ownership I'd never experienced before. It was the first time I'd ever been responsible for keeping something alive, other than my family's delusions. I built a routine, a real one for me. I'd wake up early, go for a run through the quiet neighborhood streets, feeling the burn in my lungs, feeling alive. On my way back, I'd stop at a little corner coffee shop called The Daily Grind. There was a barista there, Olivia. She had these kind, intelligent eyes and a smile that seemed to reach them every time. At first, it was just the usual polite nods and transactional talk. Then she started remembering my order. "Black coffee, 1 sugar. The usual?" she'd ask with that smile. Soon, our brief exchanges blossomed into short conversations. We talked about the weather, a new movie, the ridiculous local news. She was studying to be a graphic designer. She was funny and sharp, and she treated me like a normal person. Not a daughter, not a sister, not an ATM. She was a bright spot, a small, normal human interaction that had nothing to do with obligation or money. It felt good. It felt hopeful. I was finally starting to breathe. For the first time in my adult life, my paycheck went into my bank account and stayed there. I watched my savings grow, first to 1,000, then 2, then 5. It was a financial cushion, a safety net I was weaving for myself, thread by thread. I started looking up online courses, thinking about getting a certification in hospitality management. For the first time in my life, I was building a future that belonged to me. The constant low-level anxiety that had been my shadow for years had started to fade. I was healing. And then on a Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, sipping coffee from a mug Olivia had helped me pick out, planning my week. The screen lit up with a name I knew by heart but hadn't seen in 3 months. My dad. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold, my thumb hovering over the message, my mind racing through 100 different possibilities. Was something wrong? Was someone in the hospital? Could this be an apology? A part of me, a naive, foolish part I thought I had killed off, hoped it was an apology. I finally took a breath and opened it. 4 words. No greeting, no preamble, no "how are you?" or "we miss you." Why haven't you sent the mortgage? I read it again. And a third time. The casual entitlement. The complete and utter lack of awareness. It was breathtaking. It was as if the last 3 months hadn't happened, as if I were just a delinquent employee who had forgotten to file a report, as if my dramatic exit, the keys on the table, the finality of it all, had been nothing more than a childish tantrum that should be forgotten now that the money was needed. All the peace I had so carefully cultivated over 94 days shattered. The familiar knot of acid and anger tightened in my stomach. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone against the wall. I wanted to type back a furious, profanity-laced tirade. Instead, I set the phone down on the table. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street. I watched cars pass. I watched a woman walk her dog. I forced myself to breathe, in and out. I thought about the attic room. I thought about my dead car on the side of the road. I thought about the ramen noodles and the fear. I thought about the small growing number in my savings account. I thought about Olivia's smile. I was not the same person who had walked out of that house 3 months ago. That person was weak, conditioned to obey, desperate for approval. This person, the one who paid her own rent and fixed her own car, was different. After what felt like an eternity, I picked up the phone. I thought about all the angry, hurtful things I could say, but I chose something else. I chose the truth. Simple, quiet, devastating. I thought I wasn't welcome anymore. I hit send, and then my phone exploded. It was a digital onslaught, a coordinated attack. First, my mom. The text came in a rapid-fire succession of blue bubbles, each one more hysterical than the last. "What is wrong with you?" The bank called. "The bank, Manly. Do you understand? How could you do this to us after everything we've done for you? We gave you a roof over your head. You're trying to make us homeless. Is that what you want? To see your own parents out on the street? You are a monster." Then Matt chimed in, the voice of sneering reason. "Wow. So this is your little revenge plot? You're really going to let them lose the house just to prove a point? That's pathetic, even for you. Dad's a wreck. Mom's crying nonstop. I hope you're happy with yourself." My dad sent one more text, the plea of a man who refused to take responsibility. "You know we don't have the money, sweetheart. Please, just this once." I sat there on my thrift store chair in my tiny apartment, my apartment, and watched the messages pour in. A strange icy calm washed over me. In all their frantic, angry, pleading texts, there wasn't a single question about my life. Not a single, "How have you been?" Not a single, "Are you okay?" Not a single word that acknowledged my existence as anything other than a source of funds. It was all about the money. It had always been about the money. And this time I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel guilty. I felt powerful. They had shown their entire hand. They had confirmed every last doubt, every fear, every cynical thought I'd ever had about my place in their lives. They didn't miss their daughter. They missed her wallet. And in that moment of cold clarity, I knew something else. Their level of panic was too high. This was more than just one missed mortgage payment, or even 3. Something was very, very wrong. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the one to fix it. I was going to be the one to find out what was truly broken. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I told Frank I had a family emergency, which wasn't technically a lie. My family, I was beginning to realize, was a slow-motion, lifelong emergency. I spent the morning pacing my small apartment. The angry, pleading texts from the day before burned into my memory. My mind was working like a machine, analyzing their words, their tone. Their panic was the key. It was wild, desperate. People don't get that hysterical over 3 missed payments, especially when they'd had 3 months to prepare or at least contact me. This was the panic of people whose lies were about to catch up with them in a big, public way. My first instinct was to call the mortgage company, but then I stopped. That would be playing their game, reinserting myself back into the role of the fixer. I needed information, but I needed to get it on my own terms. I needed to see what they saw. I fired up my old laptop, the one I hadn't used much since getting my new place. I still had the login details for the main household bank account bookmarked. It was a joint account between my mom and dad, the one I used to transfer the mortgage money into every single month like clockwork. I had stopped the automatic transfers the day I left, but it never occurred to me to see if they'd removed my online access. Why would they? They probably forgot about it or didn't know how. To them, I was gone. My money was gone. The old tools were no longer relevant. My heart was pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs as I typed in the password. The screen loaded. Access granted. I navigated to the transaction history page. My hand was trembling slightly as I set the date range for the past year. I held my breath and clicked search. The page refreshed, and then I saw it. My breath hitched in my throat. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had been sending them $2,800 on the first of every month. The transfers from my personal account were there, clear as day, a neat, orderly column of my sacrifice. But the corresponding payments to the mortgage company? They were a mess. And then they just stopped. The last full mortgage payment made from that account wasn't 3 months ago. It was 7 months ago. And 7 months. The word echoed in my mind. 7. They had been taking my money and not paying the biggest, most important bill for 4 months before they even kicked me out. The fight, my mother's sudden explosion of rage, it wasn't random. It was likely the result of the first warning letter from the bank, a burst of panicked rage directed at the person she could blame instead of herself. My blood ran cold. Where did the money go? It was thousands of dollars. I started scrolling through the debits, my eyes scanning the list like a detective looking for clues. There were the usual small purchases, of course, groceries, gas. But then the bigger items started to stand out, like red flags on a white field. A $500 charge at a high-end electronics store. A $200 charge at a travel website for a vacation package to Florida. Multiple cash withdrawals for hundreds of dollars at a time, all from an ATM near the local casino. A series of payments to a luxury car dealership, not for a car, but for high-end detailing services on my dad's aging sedan. It was all there, a detailed, damning ledger of their deception. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to push my chair back from the table. All those extra shifts, all those nights I ate ramen noodles so I could save a little extra, all that scrimping and saving on my end. It was all to fund their lies, their trips, their gambling, their pathetic attempts to keep up appearances. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking with a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. I needed to talk to someone, not my parents. Not yet. I couldn't trust myself to speak to them without screaming. I needed to talk to the weak link, the one person who would crumble under the slightest pressure. I called Matt. He answered on the third ring, his voice weary and hostile. "What do you want?" "I know," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Know what? I don't know what you're talking about." He was a terrible liar. His voice was an octave too high. "The mortgage hasn't been paid in 7 months, Matt, but I've been sending the money every single month. So tell me, where did my money go?" Silence. A heavy, guilty silence. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, quick and shallow. "I'm looking at the bank statement right now," I lied, pressing my advantage. "I see a charge for $500 at Best Buy back in May. That was for your new noise-canceling headphones, wasn't it? The ones you told me a friend gave you." More silence, then a panicked whisper. "You can't tell them you know. You can't tell them you saw the account. Mom and Dad will kill me." "Tell me everything," I commanded, my voice like steel. "Now." And he did. It all came tumbling out in a pathetic, rushed confession. The money had been tight for a while. Dad had a bad run at the casino and was trying to win it back. Mom felt she deserved a vacation after a tough year. They figured they'd catch up on the mortgage next month, but next month never came. It was easier to spend the money and hope for the best. They kept thinking I was their infinite safety net, that I would just keep sending money forever and they could patch the hole later. They never, ever thought the safety net would just disappear. As he was stammering through his confession, my other line started ringing. It was my dad. I told Matt to stay on the line, muted his side, and answered the call. "Manly." My dad's voice was strained, laced with a fake, desperate cheerfulness that made my skin crawl. "Sweetheart, we had a little mix-up with the bank. Computer glitch. You know how it is. It's all a misunderstanding. If you could just help us out this one time, just send enough to cover the last few months, we can get it all sorted out. I listened to his pathetic, transparent lies. My brother's whispered confession still echoed in my other ear. The two realities were crashing together in my head. And in the middle of it all, I found a cold, hard clarity I'd never known. I was done being the solution to their problems. I was done cleaning up their messes. No, I said calmly into the phone. What do you mean, no? I mean, no, I'm not sending you any more money. I paused, letting the silence stretch before delivering the line that would change everything. You should sell the house. I hung up the phone. I unmuted Matt's call. He was still there, breathing nervously. Did you hear that? I asked him. Yeah, he whispered. Good, I said, and I hung up on him too. I didn't feel triumph. Not yet. I just felt the immense, soul-crushing weight of their betrayal. And I knew, with absolute certainty, this was far from over. Telling my parents to sell the house wasn't just a suggestion. It was a declaration of war. It was me officially abdicating my lifelong, unpaid position as their personal crisis manager. The fallout was immediate and vicious. If I thought the first wave of texts was bad, the second wave was a full-blown hurricane of guilt, manipulation, and coordinated emotional blackmail. My family, it turned out, was very good at circling the wagons, as long as they were all pointing their guns at the same person. And that person was me. My phone started ringing off the hook. But it wasn't just them anymore. They had marshaled their troops. The flying monkeys had been released. The first call was from my mother's older sister, my Aunt Susan. She was a woman who wore her disapproval like a designer handbag, and she always had it ready. Manly, honey, she began, her voice dripping with syrupy false concern that set my teeth on edge. Your mother called me. She's an absolute wreck. I've never heard her so upset. She can't eat. She can't sleep. How could you be so cruel? She's your mother. She gave you life. Aunt Susan, I said, my voice steady and cold, a tone I was getting very used to. Did she tell you why she's so upset? Did she mention that they haven't paid their mortgage in 7 months? That they used the money I sent them to go on vacation and gamble? There was a brief, telling pause. Well, she said there were some complications, Aunt Susan stammered, caught off guard by the facts. Richard hasn't been well. You know how things are. But for you to just cut them off like that, to tell them to sell their home, it's heartless. It's their home, not mine, I replied, the words tasting like freedom. And they are the ones who were heartless when they stole from me for months. This conversation is over. I ended the call before she could launch into another well-rehearsed lecture on the sacred bonds of family. Next came a text from my grandmother, my dad's mom. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression, honed over 80 years of practice. I raised my son to be a good man, and he raised you to be a good daughter. I don't know what has gotten into you, but a family is supposed to stick together through thick and thin. Your father's health is not good. This kind of stress, it's going to put him in an early grave. I hope you can live with that on your conscience. For a moment, that one hit home. I loved my grandmother. But I also knew she only ever heard my dad's side of the story. To her, he was still her perfect boy, incapable of serious wrongdoing. And I was the ungrateful grandchild throwing a tantrum. I realized, with a pang of sadness, that they were using her love for her son as a weapon against me. The messages and calls kept coming for days. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly messaging me on Facebook, telling me I was tearing the family apart. It felt like they were all in a group chat, coordinating their attacks, refining their scripts. I was the villain of a story they had all agreed upon. For a few days, it almost worked. The sheer volume of their condemnation started to wear me down. I started to doubt myself. Was I being too harsh? Was I the monster they were all painting me out to be? Was this lonely path of self-respect worth being ostracized by my entire family? Then on a Thursday night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Manly, a hesitant voice asked. It's Jenny. Jenny was my cousin, Aunt Susan's daughter. We were never close, but we were always friendly at family gatherings. She was a few years older, married with a couple of kids. Hey, Jenny, I said, surprised. What's up? Look, I know this is out of the blue, she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, as if she were afraid of being overheard. And I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I heard what's going on. My mom, she talks, and I had to call you. Okay, I said, my curiosity piqued. Don't listen to them, she said, the words rushing out. Don't listen to my mom. Don't listen to any of them. You're not the bad guy here." I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "They did the same thing to me and Mark 5 years ago. Not exactly the same, but the same playbook. We were saving up for a down payment on our first house. We had almost $10,000 saved." Her voice shook. "Uncle Richard came to us, all smiles and big ideas. He said he had a great investment opportunity, a chance to flip a small commercial property. He just needed $5,000 to close the deal and promised he'd pay it back with interest in 6 months. Said it was a surefire thing. A family legacy investment, he called it." I listened, my stomach twisting into a cold knot. It was the same language, the same empty promises. "We gave it to him," she continued, her voice cracking. "It was almost everything we had. He was family, you know. We trusted him. 6 months came and went. A year. Every time we asked, it was another excuse. The market was down. The tenants were late on rent. The city was holding up permits. Lies, all of it. We never saw a penny back. It set us back years. And when we finally put our foot down and said we were going to get a lawyer, my own mother told me I was being selfish, that I was putting money before family." I was speechless. This wasn't a one-time screw-up born of desperation. It was a pattern, a calculated, repeatable strategy of exploitation. "There's more," Jenny said, her voice dropping even lower. "The reason they're all so frantic, the reason they're trying to pressure you so hard, is because your dad has been telling everyone for months that Matt is about to launch a huge tech startup." "What?" I said, incredulous. "He's been telling people he and your mom invested heavily in it, and that you were the main backer. He made it sound like they were all about to be rich." My blood turned to ice. The lies weren't just for me. They were for everyone. They had built a fantasy world on a foundation of my money and their delusions, and I had just pulled out the cornerstone. "Jenny, why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. I was so grateful I could barely speak. "Because no one stood up for me," she said simply. "They all took his side, and it almost destroyed me. And because you deserve to know you're not crazy or cruel. You're just the first one who was strong enough to say no, and stick to it." After that call, everything changed. The guilt was gone, vaporized. It was replaced by a cold, righteous anger. This wasn't just about my money anymore. It was about the truth. Jenny had given me more than validation. She had given me a weapon. She'd mentioned Dad wanting to unlock the value of the house. It sounded like something he'd heard on a late-night infomercial. It was a clue. My resolve hardened into diamond. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. I was going to find out just how deep this rabbit hole of deceit really went. And I was going to drag their lies out into the light for everyone to see. Jenny's words, "unlock the value of the house," kept rattling around in my brain. It was a piece of financial jargon, the kind of thing someone like my dad, who got his investment advice from late-night infomercials and poker buddies, would repeat to sound smart. It was the key. I spent a whole evening in my apartment, city lights twinkling outside my window, hunched over my laptop like a detective on a case. I wasn't just looking for dirt anymore. I was looking for the murder weapon, the thing that had killed my family's finances for good. I Googled variations of that phrase. It led me down a rabbit hole of mortgages, refinancing, equity, and predatory lending. And then I found it. A term I had heard before, but never really understood. Home equity line of credit. HELOC. A sick feeling, cold and heavy, washed over me as I read the description on a financial advice website. It was a way for homeowners to borrow against the equity they'd built in their home. A revolving line of credit, like a credit card, but secured by the house itself. The website warned that it could be a useful tool if used responsibly, but a devastating trap for the desperate and undisciplined. It was exactly the kind of thing my dad, desperate for a quick fix and a shortcut to wealth, would fall for. This was the missing piece. This explained the sheer primal panic in their texts and calls. It wasn't just about the mortgage being a few months behind. That was a problem, but a manageable one. This had the feel of a catastrophe. Armed with this new theory, I needed proof. I couldn't just accuse them. I needed documents. I needed numbers. They'd just deny it, call me crazy, turn the family against me even more. I remembered Jenny saying my dad had bragged about the deal. People who brag like that are sloppy. They leave a trail. I made a calculated gamble. I spent the next morning calling a few of the smaller local credit unions in the area. I avoided the big national banks. My theory was that a smaller, hungrier institution might offer more aggressive, riskier lending products to attract customers. On the third try, I hit the jackpot. I used a simple pretext, a lie that was uncomfortably easy to tell. "Hi, my name is Manly Harris," I said, pitching my voice to sound helpful and professional. "The daughter of Richard Harris. I'm calling on his behalf. He asked me to follow up on some paperwork for his account. He's a bit disorganized with his files." The woman on the other end was friendly and helpful. "Of course. Let me just pull up his account for you. Harris, Richard. Yep, I see him right here. Are you talking about his home equity line of credit?" My heart pounded so hard I thought she might hear it through the phone. I took a steadying breath. "That's the one," I said, somehow keeping my voice level. He just wanted to confirm the current balance and the interest rate details. He mentioned something about the introductory period ending soon. "Let's see here. Yes, that's right," she said, the sound of her typing clicking in the background. "Looks like the 12-month introductory rate of 2.9% expires at the end of this month. It will then adjust to the variable prime rate, which is currently, 9.5%. She whistled softly. "That's quite a jump." "It sure is," I said, my mouth suddenly dry. "And what's the current outstanding balance on that line?" "The current balance is, wow, he's drawn the full $100,000 limit." At $100,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I had to grip the edge of my kitchen counter to stay upright. My vision swam for a second. $100,000. All of it. They had drained every last cent of equity from the house my grandfather had built, the home I had poured my own money into for years. And the payment was about to balloon into something they could never, ever hope to cover. They weren't just behind on their primary mortgage. They were about to be hit with a second massive payment they had absolutely no way of covering. They weren't just at risk of foreclosure. They were standing at the edge of a financial abyss. This was no longer a case of mismanagement. This was a catastrophic secret divorce from reality, and the bill was finally coming due. I somehow managed to thank the woman for her help and hang up the phone. Then I sat down at my table, my mind numb. This was the ultimate betrayal. My father had leveraged our family home, the one stable thing in our lives, and gambled it all away behind my back. He had stolen my past and my future at the same time. I knew what I had to do. There would be no more phone calls. No more texts. This required a face-to-face execution. I sent a single group text to my mom, dad, and Matt. "We need to talk, all of us, tomorrow. 10 o'clock a.m. The Daily Grind coffee shop. Be there." The next morning, I arrived first. I chose a table in the corner, a neutral ground, a place that was mine, not theirs. I wanted them on my turf. Olivia was working the counter. She saw the look on my face and came over. "Everything okay, Manly?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. "Just some family stuff," I said, managing a weak smile. "Hopefully it'll be over soon." She squeezed my shoulder before heading back to the counter, a small gesture of support that meant the world to me. They arrived together, a united front of indignation, ready for battle. My mom sat down without looking at me, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. My dad fidgeted, unable to meet my eyes, looking everywhere but at me. Matt slouched in his chair, arms crossed, radiating a hostile boredom. "All right, we're here," my mom said sharply, breaking the silence. "What is this about, Manly? Are you finally going to come to your senses and help your family? Have you thought about what you're doing to your father's health?" I didn't say a word. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. I placed it on the table with a soft, definitive thud that seemed to silence the entire coffee shop. "I'd like to review a few things," I said, my voice calm, clear, and cold. I opened the folder. "First," I said, sliding a printed copy of their bank statement across the table. "This is the statement from your account showing 7 consecutive months of missed mortgage payments, despite my monthly transfers of $800. You'll see my money coming in, and the mortgage payment not going out." My dad paled, his face turning a pasty gray. My mom glared at the paper as if it had personally offended her. "Banks make mistakes all the time," she sniffed. "They do," I agreed, "but they didn't make this mistake." I placed a stack of their credit card statements next to it, the ones I had access to as an authorized user, a mistake they'd forgotten to correct. And this is where some of that money went. A trip to Atlantic City, several hundred at the casino steakhouse, a new 70-inch TV, new golf clubs for you, Dad, a $200 spa day for you, Mom. My father flinched as if I'd struck him. My mother's eyes widened in fury that I had dared to track her spending. Matt looked from the papers to his parents, a flicker of genuine confusion in his eyes. He had known they were using the money, but he likely had no idea of the scale, of the sheer, brazen indulgence. But this, I said, my voice dropping as I pulled out the final document, this is the main event. It was a copy of the HELOC agreement summary that the credit union had emailed me. I slid it to the center of the table. A $100,000 line of credit, I said, letting the words hang in the air, heavy and poisonous. Opened 18 months ago, secretly. The full amount has been withdrawn, spent on who knows what, and the introductory interest rate is about to quadruple at the end of the month. I looked my father in the eye. This isn't just about being behind on the mortgage, is it? You're about to default on 2 loans. The house is gone, and you all knew. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air out of the room. My mom's face, which had been tight with righteous anger, crumbled. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. She turned to look at my dad, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. It was then I realized the truth. And she hadn't known. Not the full extent of it. He hadn't even told his own wife how badly he had failed. My dad slumped in his chair, his face finally collapsing into his hands. A low, guttural sob, the sound of a man completely and utterly broken, escaped his lips. And my mom, she just stared at the paper, then at her sobbing husband. Her eyes wide with the horror of the unforgivable truth. The fantasy was over. The game was up. I hadn't just presented evidence. I had detonated their entire world with a single sheet of paper. The immediate aftermath of the revelation was chaos in slow motion. My father's quiet, pathetic sobs were the only sound in our corner of the coffee shop for a full minute. My mother just stared at him, her expression shifting from stunned shock to a glacial, terrifying fury. This wasn't the performative anger she had always directed at me. This was something deeper, the kind of cold, poisonous rage reserved for someone who's just realized their partner didn't just ruin their lives, but made them look like a fool doing it. "You told me it was an investment," she whispered, her voice trembling with a rage far scarier than her usual shrieking. "You told me it was a sure thing. You swore to me, Richard. You looked me in the eye and lied." He didn't answer. He just kept his face buried in his hands, shoulders shaking. Matt looked like he had been unplugged from the Matrix. He stared at his father, then at the HELOC statement, then back at his father. The tech startup story he'd been fed, the promises of being a young CEO with Dad as his primary investor, it was all smoke. There was no company, there was no investment. There was just a massive, gaping $100,000 hole of debt. His entire sense of self, built on the praise and promises of his parents, had just been revealed as a complete fiction. I had planned for this moment. I had one more card to play. I hadn't invited Jessica, Matt's girlfriend, to this meeting. That would have been cruel. But I knew the truth would find its way to her eventually. And right on cue, Matt's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, read the message, and froze. His face went slack. "She knows," he whispered. He looked at me with dawning horror. "How does she know?" "I imagine the truth has a way of getting around when the lies are this big," I said flatly. Though deep down, I suspected Cousin Jenny had quietly passed the story along. Small towns talk. Matt looked like he was about to be sick. Then he turned on me, his face contorted in a rage born of pure humiliation. "This was you," he spat. "You did this. You planned this. You wanted to ruin me." "Ruin you?" I said, still eerily calm. "I'm not the one who spent the last 7 months lying to your face and spending money we didn't have. I just held up a mirror, Matt. It's not my fault you don't like what you see." He looked like he was about to lunge across the table, but my dad finally looked up. His face was tear-streaked and utterly defeated. "She's right," he choked out, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's right. It's all my fault." That admission, the first real one I'd ever heard from him in my entire life, seemed to break Matt. He just stared at our father. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a hollow, lost confusion. He shoved his chair back so hard it screeched against the floor and toppled over. He stormed out of the coffee shop without another word, leaving a trail of shattered pride behind him. Now it was just the 3 of us. The original family unit, fractured beyond repair. "So," I said, looking from my mother's stony, furious face to my father's broken one, "what's the plan?" They had no answer. They just sat there in the ruins. And then, like a scene from a script I had written in my mind, another figure appeared at our table. My uncle, my dad's younger brother David. I had called him that morning before the meeting, Told him there was a serious family crisis involving the house and Dad's finances. Told him he should be there around 10:30. He was a practical man, a contractor, the complete opposite of my dreamy, irresponsible father. He placed a heavy hand on his brother's shoulder. "Richie," he said softly, his voice full of deep, weary disappointment. "What have you done?" He looked at the papers on the table, his face grim. He wasn't there as a savior. He was there as a witness. He turned to me, his eyes filled not with judgment, but with a sad understanding. "You did what you had to do, kid," he murmured, so low only I could hear. It was a small moment of validation, and it meant more than he could ever know. Then he turned back to my dad. "I'll help you find a lawyer, Richard," he said, voice firm. "A bankruptcy lawyer. They'll walk you through the options. But that's it. You dug this hole. You're going to have to do the work to climb out of it." He looked at my mom, who was still staring daggers at her husband. "Karen, you can stay with me and Carol for a little while, until you figure things out." He notably didn't offer to house them both. He knew. A divorce wasn't just a possibility. It was now a probability. I stood up. My work here was done. The truth was out. The power dynamic had been permanently shattered. I left them there, my broken father, my furious mother, and my practical uncle, to sort through the pieces of the life they had destroyed. A few weeks passed. I didn't hear from any of them directly. The silence was a relief. Then one evening I got a call from Frank. "Manley," he said, his voice hesitant. "You're not going to believe this." "What?" "Your brother, Matt. He came in today." My stomach clenched. "What did he want? Money?" "No," Frank said, surprised. "He asked for a job. Any job. Said he'd wash dishes, mop floors, take out trash. Said he needed the money and was willing to work for it." I was stunned. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a moment of redemption. It was the sound of a man who had hit absolute, undeniable rock bottom. For the first time, Matt was about to learn the lesson I had learned at 16. The world doesn't give you anything for free. You have to earn it, one greasy plate at a time. The 6 months that followed were a slow, painful crawl out of the wreckage for my family. For me, it was a period of cautious, quiet growth. The house, as predicted, was the first casualty. With 2 defaulted loans against it, the bank moved quickly and ruthlessly. There was no for sale sign on the lawn, no polite open houses. It went straight into foreclosure and was sold at a county auction for a fraction of what it was once worth. The small amount of money left over, after the bank and credit union took their share, was completely eaten up by legal fees from the bankruptcy lawyer Uncle David had found for them. They walked away with nothing but the clothes on their backs, and the debt bankruptcy couldn't erase. My parents' marriage, which I realized had been a hollow shell for years, didn't survive the financial implosion. The shared stress didn't bring them together. It just highlighted the deep cracks of deceit and resentment that had been there all along. My mom, true to Uncle David's prediction, filed for divorce. The proceedings were bitter and ugly, full of accusations and blame. She stayed with Uncle David and his wife for a few months, a humbling experience for a woman who had prided herself on her independence. Eventually, she found a small, one-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex on the bad side of town. The kind of place with peeling paint, permanent residents who sat on their balconies at all hours, and the constant smell of boiled cabbage in the hallways. She had to go back to work full-time, taking a job as a checker at a grocery store. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. After years of looking down on me for buying the family groceries, she was now the one scanning them for a living. Her days dictated by the beep of a checkout scanner. My dad fared worse. His health, once used as a guilt tool, genuinely declined. The stress and shame seemed to age him a decade overnight. He ended up renting a single room in a boarding house, the same kind of place he once scornfully called a flop house. He got a part-time job as a handyman for the apartment complex he lived in, fixing leaky faucets and patching drywall for people who had more than he did. I saw him once from my car, driving through that part of town. He was struggling to carry a toolbox. His shoulders slumped, his face a mask of weary resignation. He looked like a ghost haunting the ruins of his own life. And Matt? Frank, true to his word, had given him a job. He started at the absolute bottom, just like I had all those years ago. He was the dishwasher. I saw him a few times when I came in on my day off to check on things. He was quiet, his eyes always downcast, avoiding my gaze. The arrogant swagger, the sense of entitlement that had once defined him, was completely gone. It had been replaced by the weary slump of someone who spends 10 hours a day with their hands in hot, greasy water. Frank told me he was a good worker, never late, never complained, just did his job. He was living in a small room he rented from a coworker, sharing a house with 3 other guys from the kitchen staff. He was paying his own rent, buying his own food. He was 25 years old, and finally, painfully, learning what it meant to be an adult. While my family unraveled, I was quietly rebuilding. Not from ashes because I hadn't burned. They had. I had merely stepped back and let the match fall. With no more payments draining my account every month, I finally had breathing room. Financially, emotionally, spiritually. I hired a financial advisor, started putting real money into savings, started dreaming about things that were once impossible, like buying a place of my own, a home that would actually belong to me. I went back to school part-time, working toward a business degree, classes on weekends and online at night. The kind of investment my younger self never thought she was allowed to make. Frank, ever observant, noticed. "You've changed," he said one afternoon as we stood side by side in the back office. "You stand straighter. You smile more. You look like you finally believe you deserve to be here." "I think I do," I said simply. "For the first time, I think I really do." It wasn't about the job anymore. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself I had buried under years of obligation, guilt, and emotional manipulation. People started to notice. I made new friends. I even started dating again. And one day, on a bright spring morning, I signed a lease for my own place. A small, sunlit apartment with hardwood floors, a clawfoot tub, and a balcony that overlooked a tree-lined street. Nothing fancy. But it was mine. I bought my first new couch, hung art I loved, filled the kitchen with groceries I chose. No one rolling their eyes. No one silently judging the price of almond milk. Just me. Free. One night, a few months later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a note from my dad. The handwriting was shaky. "Manly, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve to ask. I just wanted you to know that I think about everything I did, everything I let happen, every single day. You were the best thing that I ever had in my life, and I treated you like a backup plan. I wish I had told you this sooner. I was proud of you, always, even when I pretended I wasn't. I'm sorry. Dad." I folded the letter carefully and slid it into a drawer. It didn't change anything. But it was something. Closure, maybe, or at least the start of it. If you've made it this far, thanks for listening. Thanks for letting me tell the truth that lived in the shadows for way too long. To anyone who's ever felt like the background character in their own family, to anyone who's paid the bills and cleaned the messes and never got invited to sit at the grown-up table, I see you. And it's okay to walk away. You are not a villain for saying, enough. You are not cruel for choosing like yourself. Sometimes the most radical act of love is to stop saving the people who keep setting you on fire. And sometimes freedom looks like a quiet apartment, a paid phone bill, and peace.